innovate and sustain its important contribution to our society and the economy. The final report will be published in early June, but today we're going to give you a sneak preview of the early findings and also the opportunity to shape this important piece of work. Before I hand over to Jack and David from Futuresource, who will take you through the research, I'd like to invite Kate Bulkley to introduce herself, and later Jamie Hindhaugh is going to join us when we go to questions. So, Kate.
Hi, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to be here. I'm a media commentator and journalist, and I'm here, I think, basically to ask some questions and also give some opinions about this very important research, which I think I'm very excited to be getting a sneak preview of.
Thank you, Kate. First, a little bit of housekeeping. If you hear a fire alarm, incidentally, your house is on fire, so get out quick. On a more serious note, please submit your questions via the Q&A box underneath the slides window, and I'll do my very best to get to them. And I now pass over to David and Jack from Futuresource, who are going to take us through our research.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. So as Richard mentioned, we've been working hard over recent weeks in preparation for today and also for the upcoming report on the UK state of the nation when it comes to digital television. And we'll be publishing that in early June. There'll be a lot more detail in that, and Jack will give you a little bit of a flavour as to how you can contribute to that over the coming half an hour. So I head up the entertainment content team here at Futuresource, and Jack heads up the consumer electronics team. So before we move on, just like to give you a little bit of flavour, I think just echoing what Richard said. I think there's no doubt about it that the UK has one of the most dynamic and technologically advanced TV landscapes worldwide. So it's got a strong free-to-air and pay-TV culture blend, which is now very much supplemented by the proliferation of premium content streaming. If we look at this, an overall snapshot of where we're at in 2019, now we have a few stats riddled throughout the report, which bringing back some of the big picture trends. Consumer spending on dedicated TV hardware, TV and video content, as well as TV advertising, totaled over £16 billion in 2019. Now, this was actually marginal growth on 2018. Now, clearly, this is now going to be tested in 2020. It just goes to show the overall scale of this sector. Now, this includes within the hardware space. It doesn't include any spend, so any trade set-top boxes either. It's only consumer spend and that advertising. So clearly, it's even bigger than this 16 billion suggests. If we look at some of the other key stats, and again, just highlighting how the UK is at the forefront of this innovation and this technologically advanced sector. 69% of the UK households have at least one smart TV. This is actually one of the highest levels in the world, so it's up there with the likes of the US, Australia, and the Nordic countries. We see a fairly even uptake between pay TV and free-to-air, so pay TV just ahead at 54%. Whilst in 2019, we also hit the milestone of over half of all households taking at least one SVOD service. So in fact, we've now seen that overall, of those who take SVOD, they take on average 2 services now, and that is increasing pretty much by the week right now. So this strong pay TV and free-to-air adoption, as well as the strong SVOD adoption we've now seen, is also complemented by over 70% of households using some form of broadcaster VOD service. And we'll actually see that uptake strong across all demographics. And it's that demographic side which I'll touch on in more detail later, as it's really important when we look at the diversification of audiences, platforms and delivery. In addition to this, UK television production exports are total around 1.4 billion on an annual basis, while 6.7 billion is spent annually by broadcasters on network television programming. We'll be sizing the UK television broadcast sector in more detail in the full report, so there'll be a whole host of stats in there. Hi, Jack. I think you may be on mute.
Jack, I think you're still on mute. David, could you talk us through these?
Yeah, no problem. So one of the key areas which Richard mentioned and the real focus of the report is on broadcast innovation, and particularly that broadcast innovation within the UK. As Richard mentioned, the UK is effectively home to a number of best-in-class companies on a global basis, which has driven innovation across the broadcast and television supply and value chain. We've got companies like, BBC, Sky, BT Sport in particular, some of these major consumer brands. However, when we're speaking with a number of our clients on a global basis, we use these as case studies. These technological innovation which these companies are providing, they provide a seamless customer experience, and it has inspired, I think, it's fair to say, it's inspired many similar initiatives worldwide. Now, the UK certainly benefits from the presence of a really strong R&D foundation, which has helped give rise to this innovation. In addition to a high-quality content production community, industry-leading standards, which, of course, the DTG has helped found and develop, and a really strong history of collaboration within this dynamic landscape. In particular, within this, the strength of the key broadcasters has helped this collaboration and really can't be underestimated. So this collaboration isn't just within the broadcast landscape, but it's also beyond this now as we move more and more into OTT. I think what's interesting as well, this is within the industry. Clearly, this is being driven by what the UK has always had, this content and technology-hungry consumer.
David, am I able to chip in?
Yeah,
can you hear me now?
You're
back, Jack. Welcome back, Jack.
Oh, that's great. Well, I've no idea what happened there. I do apologise, everybody. Thanks very much, David. Yeah, absolutely. As he says, the whole pay TV and broadcast landscape in the UK is so vibrant anyway that drives both innovative content and digital television innovation. So we've got all sorts of examples that we could name. Of course, there are many, but a few headline acts. BT Sport developing new services such as 8K VR there, which was unveiled with the Arsenal Olympiacos match in February, relaying to Samsung 8K sets. It's also pioneering remote production and delivery, particularly relevant during lockdown, and we will be talking about COVID-19 and its impact during the course of this webinar. And also, it's working on consumer user interfaces, of course. Meanwhile, the BBC's R&D department is one of worldwide renown, one of the few remaining public service broadcast R&D centres. It employs 200 people. It's currently got 85 R&D projects, such as harnessing real-time rendering and delivery technologies pioneered in the games and visual effects industries to offer broadcasters the opportunity to deliver completely personal experiences. That's the title of that particular project. Through to delivering immersive experience on mobiles using live IP and production systems. So the R&D is a globally renowned research and development institution that we're lucky enough to have in this country. And Sky, of course, as David mentioned, is a blue chip pay TV company known around the world. Global reputation for its service, doubling down on innovation with a 77,000 square foot centre being built for £40 million at Osterley Park, just west of London. Sky has obviously pioneered addressable advertising with AdSmart, and of course, ITV also has weighed in. It's been very active in addressable advertising. But as I say, these are just some of the headline acts, aren't they? There's a cast involving a multitude of technology partners in this country, and it has to be said beyond, that enable such consumer-facing companies to deliver this innovation in the form of really rich consumer experiences. And the innovation is across the board. There's such a wide diversity of areas for TV innovation, and some are listed here. I mean, this is in alphabetical order, but I already mentioned addressable advertising, which David will actually refer to later on, because it is obviously important for the finances of television going forward. But AI and machine learning have got their role to play, and the BBC is amongst those harnessing this. They've got a project where they're creating highlight packages from a live event. They trialled it with the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, where there are edits made without human intervention, and these can be purposed according to various lengths, depending on the time slot it's going to be used for. AR, of course, BT Sport, as I mentioned before, is on that, and hopefully Jamie will be able to comment on that later on. And harnessing 5G even for broadcast. Actually, we think it's more likely that 5G would be used for relaying outside broadcast feeds direct to the studio, but that's another area of innovation. And all important in our view, integration of broadcast and IP for that seamless consumer experience. We believe it's critical, and we'll be touching upon that again shortly. Another one in there, improved picture quality. It shouldn't be forgotten, and work is being conducted, of course, on UHD and 8K as we speak. And our consumer research at Futuresource Consulting, when we ask people what do they look for in their next TV, actually a better picture is, I suppose not surprisingly, but it's easy to forget the basics, that they want a really good picture. They want a big picture as well, of course. And then other factors such as smart TV comes into this as well. Sound technology is another one. Richard mentioned this at the start. We see the pay TV operators now active in introducing Dolby Atmos to enhance their 4K UHD channels. And sound technology goes beyond that immersive experience, important as it is. It also touches upon those with hearing difficulties, so accessibility, and that is something that object-oriented audio can really help with. User search and discovery of content is critical. AI and voice technology has a role to play here. From simply, of course, we have smart TVs which are compatible with Alexa and Google, etc. We're already seeing this coming into people's homes, and there's so much more that can be done here for digital television. The list goes on, and I'm sure you could expand it. But all that points really to a positive outlook for the innovation community to capitalise upon. And many of you listening in will be part of that community, I'm sure. And you may be interested to know that we have this SurveyMonkey questionnaire survey, which Richard touched upon, which is open to listeners and members of the DTG as well. And you can log into that and answer some questions, some basic questions about the trends in the industry, but also with this particular issue, where do you think is the most potential? Which of these is the most important innovations going forward, areas to innovate, if you like? And if you don't see what you think is important on the list, you have the opportunity to add your own. That, by the way, is open until the 15th of May, that questionnaire. As David showed earlier, 45% of households are reliant on free-to-air, and beyond that, of course, we know that there are pay TV households that have TVs that would be maybe terrestrial sets as well. So terrestrial remains critical and will do for the foreseeable future. We've got a standards-based implementation, and this ensures that devices work with the services. And, of course, that's been part of the collaboration, part of the history, part of the achievement of the UK broadcast technology industry. But the focus is now shifting to bring IP, particularly into internet delivered content, up to the level of broadcast, and to integrate it into cable, satellite, and terrestrial. The message is here really about getting the best of both worlds in terms of user experience for place and time shifting, also to enable the broadcasters to do that dynamic switching of services between the two, between broadcast and IP and back again, to a point where the user should be unaware actually and shouldn't even need to care whether their signal is coming from IP or broadcast. So this makes broadcasters, enables them to make decisions about whether a channel or an event or even an advertising break should be delivered via broadcast or IP. So a niche arts program might be on IP, whilst a major event such as a royal wedding could be handled by the robust infrastructure that broadcast offers. Of course, this is where the DVBI spec comes in. That's what that is intended to address. So bringing IP-delivered content onto the EPG alongside broadcast-delivered programs. These are areas which are intensely important going forward. Meanwhile, of course, 5G is being explored to offer unicast services and indeed local TV being relayed by an increasingly densified network. We believe actually that there is also more perhaps of a role for 5G when it comes to acquisition of content from outside broadcast, for example, and feeding it into the hub. So there's plenty of innovation to come on all of these points. But they do, of course, bring, whilst they bring opportunities, they also bring challenges and clouds on the horizon potentially as well. On the positive side, yes, we've got that strong history of broadcast. Most countries simply do not have that strength in depth of both free-to-air broadcasting, public service channels, and top-notch pay TV options. We've got that mature and reliable ecosystem. And that switch over that occurred in the 90s over to digital, that occurred all very smoothly. There's basically an general agreement that we need to get the best of both worlds for broadcast services being augmented by IP. This is all good. Broadcast for the reach, IP for the personalization, place shifting and time shifting. So this is all very important and exciting developments. But it does bring with it some challenges as well. There's pressure on spectrum for terrestrial TV, and that means that it is more difficult to introduce services, for example, 4K UHD. That is something which at the moment is restricted to a few channels on pay TV platforms. Public service broadcasting really needs that spectrum to deliver universality and a free use, free point of use service obligations. So, as I say, when you've got nearly half of the country totally reliant on broadcast for linear TV viewing, this is still very important. Although the spectrum issues are constraining things. Some might actually argue that broadcast is complete, if you like, that the innovation has been done, and the focus of R&D should be on IP. So there does appear, it could be argued, a bit of a lack of recent innovation on the broadcast side. We don't hear people talking about DVB-S3 or DVB-T3, and as a TV viewer, it is distinctly odd to see that red screen after the BBC One News in the evening, which says that BBC One HD can't yet show programmes from your area. Incidentally, I'm told that that one, which comes after the 6 o'clock news, is actually very popular. It pops up on the audience ratings because it's got a countdown, and that's the countdown to when the kids go and have their bath, apparently, in many households. But more seriously, the point here is it's technically possible, of course, to ensure that there is that switch to local channels, but but it's not actually been actioned, and maybe this is a symbol of a lack of momentum in broadcast innovation. Some of this is of course about money. There needs to be a strong case put for broadcast to retain its role as serving the whole population in a way that's resilient and free at point of view. This might in itself help bolster that case to improve, for example, transmission efficiency. So further innovation in broadcast. We take interoperability for granted, don't we, in this country? But it's hard to achieve without real coordination and collaboration. But we need to bear in mind with international players like Netflix and Amazon, we're increasingly seeing end-to-end ownership of ecosystems driven by IP, and in fact they are driving, if you like, the 4K beyond any TV channels here in the UK. So much of this innovation is actually being driven from outside the UK, with hardware giving way to more software-based solutions. But one thing we do know is that trust and resilience is key, and that is something which needs to be maintained. And interestingly, talking about trust and resilience, something which has been reinforced by our lockdown COVID-19 is that broadband is something which we can rely on rather more than we previously thought. You can see here on the left that the post-COVID-19 peaks has come in around 7.5, and indeed the past peak that's been handled by BT is 17.5. So it is really quite being easily handled at the moment. The amount of business being transacted over IP. So we found that superfast broadband is sufficient for that video streaming. Yes, Netflix, Amazon, YouTube, etc. have actually downscaled a little bit in order to make sure their service is okay. But it seems to be working well. That's the message. Although we do believe that live events would remain challenging. You know, if there was no broadcast and everybody was reliant on IP, then that would still be a big challenge for the backbone. And the note here, as we see in many areas of industries actually, is that COVID-19 is actually accelerating certain trends. And we know that there's been a sort of a move towards IP-based services in addition to broadcast. And during the course of COVID-19 and the lockdown, we've seen absolute additional reliance on IP. And it seems to be working okay. And well, the message is that that should trigger more innovation. There should be more confidence that IP is an effective means by which to deliver digital television. Okay, we're going to take a little break there in order that people can consider that and see if there are any questions. Over to you again, Richard.
Thank you very much, Jack and David. There's a lot going on there, a lot to take in. Kate, there is an irony that your partner in crime on the panel today, Jamie from BT, has an interoperability with On24, I believe are based in San Francisco, and Apple and Safari, who are based in Cupertino. So maybe they need to drive down the road and see if they can get their interoperability to work. I guess the first question and observation from me is, why have we got such a long history of innovation, and why are we so innovative in the UK?
Are you asking me, or are you asking Futuresource?
Yeah, Kate initially. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think what's interesting about this is that if you look at Futuresource's slides, which are marvelous, thank you, it shows the richness of innovation that's happened in the UK. What is interesting also in their slides is as we move more into an IP-based universe, even Jack himself said that a lot of this innovation is going to be driven from outside of the UK. So I think we're at a tipping point here. So although it's great to talk about how wonderful the innovation has been, and it has been, and I think there's potential to continue that robustness, we have to be aware that there's some very big players, for example, Netflix and Google and the other big tech platforms, which, as you say, have bases not in the UK, but in Silicon Valley, who are driving a lot of this innovation. And this whole idea of owning, end-to-end ownership of ecosystems. I mean, that is a huge one. Who's actually going to make the decision about how we construct these systems, how they are, what kind of integration there is, what are the standards, all those things that the DTG and broadcast has been all about, is getting, I don't want to use the word threatened, but it is under threat in the sense that we have to figure out how to work with these players in a much more robust way, I think.
Okay, we've got a few questions that have come in from our audience. A question on, do any of the research team or Kate, do you have any view on whether a second digital switchover is needed in the UK to drive a move to more efficient use of the spectrum? And I guess some context for this is in the States, they've got a clear vision towards next-gen TV with ATSC 3.0. In France, CSA are pushing towards a switch to HEVC, T2 and Ultra HD for their Olympics in 2024. So it has been pointed out that we've kind of got a bit of a lack of a plan here. Any view on whether we should do a second switch?
I have an opinion, but I'm sure Jack is a better place to talk about this first. So Jack, why don't you tell us first and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I guess we've used the word user-led until now. So what consumers really want? Is it that demand, for example, for 4K on the terrestrial platform? So a switch over, if you like. We're not seeing it yet. I think that case is still to be proved, really. I'm sure that certain sectors of the industry would rub their hands at the idea of a switch over, or indeed a switch off, because of course that then forces people to buy new devices. And but I think that is something that would only be undertaken with great thought, especially I know perhaps COVID-19 clouds a lot of our thinking, but the economy isn't great right now. And so the thought that there would be a deadline anytime soon to be switching over or switching off, implying that people need to buy new kit, would be a bit of a difficult area at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also might... Yeah, I agree with what he's saying. I also would say that there's a spectrum issue as well, because if you do another switchover, that might free up some more spectrum, which in some, if you think about it in some way, is important, because if you look at where 5G is and how much spectrum we're going to need and all that kind of stuff, is compression going to get there? I mean, I think that there's an issue there as well. I also think there's going to be increasing challenges on the backbone. It's a little bit off this question, but it's a little bit what Jack was talking about before when he said, with live events, we're going to see much more pressure on the backbone, even though the broadband has been fairly resilient so far. I mean, just today, we've got the EPL talking about putting at least half of their games on YouTube, right? I mean, that's going to be a big burden. So there's some issues there about that. But I agree with him about the devices and the fact that people aren't going to have a lot of money, I don't think, for at least the next 9 to 18 months.
I'll just point out, at risk of having my house burned down, that I've invested in a 5G all-home solution at the beginning of lockdown, because there was a massive pressure on broadband in my street in Clapham. Hopefully we've got Jamie Hindhaugh from BT's joined us on audio only. Jamie, are you there?
Yeah.
No?
Can you hear me?
Hi, Jamie. Can you introduce yourself and maybe make some comments?
Yeah, it's Jamie Hindhaugh here. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of BT Sport. So I was at the BBC a very long time, set up and run BT Sport and lead on our innovation, and obviously have a face for radio. As no one can see me. And yes, lead on innovation. Can't get on a bloody website.
We're going to blame Apple. We're putting it all at Apple's door. Don't worry, Jamie.
So what? Sorry, I've been fiddling around trying to get in. What is it? I've been listening to some of the conversation.
One of the questions was talking about the kind of the role of IP and broadcast, and should we be driving more innovation on broadcast, or should we even be talking about a move to a kind of more all IP world? And I guess the kind of whole multi-platform, multi-device question would be maybe a good one for you to comment on what you've been doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, I think there's quite a big misnomer where we talk about broadcast and IP as separate, because IP is just another pipe for delivering broadcast content. As regards to leading on innovation, I mean, at BT Sport, we're the first in the world for 4K, we're the first in the world for Dolby Atmos, first in the world for VR, first in the world for HDR. And the reason for that, quite simply, is live sport drives engagement, and innovation drives credibility and engagement. We've had IP channels for 7 years as of Sky. Sky have had them longer. And I think the really exciting thing that we should all be talking about what IP does is it moves us from broadcasting one-to-many, from broadcasting one-to-one. So with that, you start looking at personalization. And I'll give you a really good example. So if you want to talk about format, so I have a channel called BT Sport Ultimate. And depending what device you're on, depending what connectivity you have, and depending what subscription you have, that channel will super serve the best format for the platform you're on, whether that's 4K, HD, SDR, HDR, or a combination of all with Dolby Atmos. And that's where this IP protocol becomes very clever in enabling people to personalize their experience, to get the best out of the device they're watching on. But also, to be honest, stop us all talking in acronyms all the time, because it doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people. So for me, BT Sport Ultimate is about the ultimate viewing experience, and it's about utilizing IP to drive personalization and drive interactivity. And I'm sure we'll get onto it. There's a lot of other initiatives that we're working on in an IP world. And I did hear the comment about who's going to lead, whether it's UK or US. And what I would say, from a broadcast perspective, the UK are way ahead of the rest of the world around formats and personalization for audience engagement. And I think that will continue, because I think our ecosystem is about driving, on the pay TV model at the heart of it, even though I'm on IP and on all platforms, including YouTube. But at the heart of it is we need to drive engagement. We need a raison d'etre for why people will want to watch live sport with us. So it's quite a long answer. I've been pent up.
Pent up with interoperability challenges. Thanks, Jamie, and I'm really glad you've been able to join us. I don't know if Jack, David, you've got anything else to comment on that, or Kate, or should we go on with the research? Excellent.
Sorry, can I say one thing?
Yeah, sure, Kate. Yeah.
So I think Jamie's point about moving towards more personalization and interactivity is a really key point, because not only is it going to make the viewing experience better, but it also might provide other revenue levers, ways to actually engage with people and actually make some money. I think where we're going to now with this fragmentation of audiences, which I think David is going to talk about next, is that it's going to be harder and harder to figure out how to attract an audience and actually leverage that audience to make money out of it. And given what's going on with live sport, for example, we're going to have all this pent up demand for live sport. They're probably going to throw a lot of the EPL games on YouTube, as I mentioned. How is that going to work? So I just think that that's really interesting thing to think about. Where is broadcasting going, particularly as we move towards a more world?
Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, can I just remind everyone that it's speculation about where EPL will end up, and there's a different story every night at the moment about that. Secondly, I think the roadmap we're already on, I think and it takes you right back to why personalization is so important. The challenge for us as broadcasters was we always either have to curate content or curate formats or make different formats, different platforms to try and have one model that reaches all. And with personalization, it means I can broadcast one program with a completely different look and feel depending on each individual's personal choice. So it enables you to reach a wider audience. It enables you to give people choice. It enables you to become a more inclusive broadcaster that absolutely meets multiple different needs, which you simply cannot do when you are broadcasting one-to-many. And we are, we'll probably talk about it later, we are driving a huge amount around this because it's very clear, and especially in these current climates, that the people want to tailor content for how they want to view it. And yes, that can also be live sport in a live event. You know, what sort of statistical overlay do you want? Do you want to hear a commentator? Don't you want to hear a commentator? Are you colorblind? Et cetera, et cetera. All of that is enabled by utilizing object-based broadcasting through IP, and we're already delivering some of it. Dolby Atmos is actually object-based broadcasting, believe it or not, and we've been doing that for 2 years over IP. And a little fact on that as well is sound actually is really important because it enhances your viewing experience by up to 60%. So not only do you get the sound of the stadium in your home, but you also feel like you're closer to the action through the picture quality.
Excellent, Jamie. I think my personal view is I think object-based is very much the future, and we're going to see some really exciting different formats for different types of viewers. One of the points that's raised is we've got to make sure we hold on to the youth viewer, and they view in a different way on different devices. During lockdown, we've seen older viewers watching TV on different devices. So we've seen a real flip in how people are viewing, so super important. David, can you now, if you'd be kind enough to take us through the rest of the research, and then we can go to some more questions. If you're in the audience, can you please keep questions flowing, and I'll put them to the panel and to the research team as we get towards the end. David.
Thanks, everyone. We touched on some really important points there. I think the point of personalisation is something I'll touch on briefly again. We have been speaking with the industry, and some of you will be on the call, today, or will be listening in. And personalisation has definitely been one of those hot words of the last 2 to 3 weeks during our conversations. And I guess, potentially a bit cliche going back, 20 years at sort of the birth of this new wave of digital media. But I think it's more relevant than ever because consumers can now see the value in personalisation, and the industry and services can extract that value from those experiences too. So I think, there is a lot of headroom. The messages we're getting loud and clear is there's still a lot of headroom for innovation when it comes to personalised viewing experiences and the revenue and value that can generate. Okay, I'm just going to take it back a step, actually. I think one of the reasons we've seen this huge growth in viewing of OTT content and IP content is effectively the growth in hardware base we've seen in recent years. And I mentioned up front, the UK has actually been particularly at the forefront of this adoption. And it's driven these new experiences. So if we look where we've come from in 2015 to where we are now in terms of the install base, we've effectively seen a doubling in the install base of the smart TVs. So going from 12 million to in 2015 to 24 million in 2019. Add on top of that, you've got media streamers, so the likes of your Roku's, Apple TVs, your Now TV sticks, Amazon Fires, etc. See, that's pretty much been a tripling in that installed base between 2015 and 2019. So consumers now, as well as the traditional, the broadcast delivery, they're now able to get OTT content delivered directly to their sets, and that obviously opens up a whole host of other areas. I think what's also key here is that those experiences on these TVs, particularly those sold in the last 3 years or so, is much better than it was 4 to 5 years ago. That experience is so much more seamless, which has opened up a wider demographic. It's much easier for more people to enjoy. If we add on top of that, we've got over 20 million IP-enabled set-top boxes in use in the UK too, from the likes of Sky, Virgin, all the IPTV providers, as well as obviously Freeview and Freesat too. So you've got a pretty significant addressable base there already. So this has helped give rise effectively to viewing of OTT content on these sets. And in fact, very quickly, it's become the preferred way to watch services like Amazon Prime Video and Netflix. So around 3/4 of these users of these services say viewing on a TV is their preferred way to watch, so ahead of watching on a laptop, smartphone, tablet, etc. Now, even for YouTube, we're at 30%. Now, given this is a mobile or PC computer-led service historically, we're starting to see, that increase. Interestingly, we expect that to further increase moving forwards, perhaps with launch of an Android TV and even voice search, which is perhaps a little bit tricky on YouTube on TV. And even iPlayer, their viewing on a TV is steadily been growing from day one, and it exceeded 60% of total views last year. So, that plethora and that mix of viewing is really evident to see. But TV, when it comes to premium content, TV, OTT content is the place to do that. If we look, just really cartooning the overall landscape, if we look at state of the overall landscape, you can see the dynamism in this chart. This is covering a number of the key services. Some of the services that we've not managed to fit in, particularly some of the other SVOD services are perhaps more illustrative. But it just shows sort of the depth, the dynamism which is in the UK space. We've had a chart in the US, which for a number of years, which we keep adding to, and that is looking crazy right now. And actually, when we look at the UK, we're almost getting to the same levels where we saw the US 1 to 2 years ago in terms of the breadth of services. And this is really highlighting that continuous fragmentation, particularly on OTT services. And that's complementing or in some forms competing with that traditional TV broadcast. And ultimately, it provides increased choice for the consumer. And you just think about your own personal viewing, across all these different boxes here, you're probably dipping into 4 or 5 different services, maybe even more across all of these. We've seen a marked rise in the number of UK consumers using multiple services and platforms, particularly paid-for services and platforms, in the last 18 months alone. And this has grown even further during this lockdown period. One of the big trends we're seeing so far this year, and we were expecting anyway, and it's gone to another level, is this service stacking. That's a topic for another day. The concept of how many services is enough keeps coming up. We feel as we're not close to saturation yet, but it's a really interesting point, which again is perhaps more in the limelight now and for the rest of the year as we come out of lockdown. And what else is key and important around this fragmentation is it's driving the need for further collaboration. And potentially, the term super aggregation is something we've used. The super aggregation across TV platforms and these dedicated OTT services. I think this will ultimately benefit the consumer through increased personalization in particular, pan-service search, potential single billing, and the common data which could enable personalized experiences and addressable advertising. So despite this fragmentation, I think the one thing it does highlight, whether that's within UK companies or with UK companies and some of the global media conglomerates we've discussed, is that collaboration can help improve this user experience overall, and perhaps make a bit more sense of this fragmentation that the consumers are seeing right now. So Kate alluded to the fact that we're seeing fragmenting audiences, and in particular how those fragmenting audiences relate to the youth experience and youth viewing. Now, overall, as no surprising, you will have seen similar data from the likes of Ofcom as well and Barb. Live TV, still dominates overall viewing. This is taken from our Live Digital Consumer Survey. In fact, live TV dominates, but OTT viewing is diversifying both these viewing and audiences. If you look at the shift between December 2018 and 2019, and this is, let's say, a consumer survey of 2,000 UK respondents, national representative, the total broadcast source has gone from 70 to 61%. So this is live TV plus broadcast avoided and recorded programs on your set-top box. Total OTT, which is a slightly different cut, has grown from 36 to 44% of overall viewing. So that includes the likes of SVOD, BVOD, YouTube, etc., social media. So you can see, the steady shifts, but that live TV still very much is prominent. So again, it's not just about the competing platforms between broadcast and OTT. It's how they complement each other and how, as Jamie said, how they can work across these different platforms. When we look at the youth market, I think it's particularly pertinent to see, perhaps, pointing a little bit to the future, but also, where this may be heading, and perhaps the challenge that, the broadcast and the OTT industry have moving forward is addressing youth engagement across different platforms. I mentioned the broadcast source. In 61% across all respondents. It's actually only 40% of viewing among 16 to 25-year-olds, and double that in over 55s. Now, what we've seen in lockdown, as Kate alluded to, is that diversification of this viewing. So we've seen perhaps the older demographic engage either more or for the first time with different streaming services and different platforms. And we certainly believe that some of that behaviour will stick. And in fact, it's accelerated consumers being comfortable with using different OTT platforms. So OTT in 16-25s accounts for over 2/3 of viewing. And in that 55-year-old plus, we're looking at just 25% of viewing. So again, going back to Jack's point earlier about sort of the need for resilience in that broadcast landscape, we're some way off. And again, we're talking about sort of that broadcast switchover as well. We're some way off where IP is totally universal and addresses all corners of the demographic sphere. So, we're many, many years away from that. And in terms of live TV, it's again 55% in the over 55s and just 21% in the 16 to 25. So again, how important broadcast is for a significant proportion of the population and a growing proportion of the population, which is incredibly important as well. And, again, from our conversations with the industry, one of the key things which has kept cropping up is how can the broadcast industry right now embrace multiple platforms, multiple devices, and OTT viewing to drive that youth engagement in television content. And again, that's perhaps one of the key challenges we see moving forward. And just finally from me, I think it's really important to talk about the TV advertising landscape. And clearly it's a very tough time right now. We do feel that the industry will rebound potentially in at least 2021. But there are three key areas which are sort of driving rapid change beyond this current pandemic we're seeing. We're seeing the evolution of addressable TV as this connectivity I mentioned soars. Obviously, Sky AdSmart in the UK have been pioneering there, not just in the UK, but again, they're seen as perhaps a global case study. And we feel there's significant further innovation here, which can ultimately drive this innovation towards a tipping point. So we've got more people being served ads through addressable TV than not. But also, the point Jamie and Kate mentioned about this personalised experience, personalised viewing experiences. We're only at the tip of the iceberg of what we can do when it comes to addressable TV here and personalised, being served personalised ads. So there's a lot more in terms of the creativity within the ads, but obviously the relevance and the value, what can be extracted from those. So that's a whole topic in its own right, but it's incredibly important. And we feel one of the big areas of innovation moving forwards, and that will help fuel further innovation through the revenue that generates. I'll just touch on these last 2 points quickly. Another one of the dynamics is we talked about the growth in OTT, but in particular the growth in premium SVOD services like Netflix, Disney Plus, basically our ad-free platforms. So your eyeballs are shifting to services where ads aren't being served, and that obviously causes a little bit of a challenge for the sector. Again, particularly amongst that youth demographic, where obviously YouTube they're being served very personalised ads in many cases, but they're not being served any when they're viewing SVOD. So, this SVOD is the largest growth sector we're seeing. We saw a boom last year, 28 million subscriptions overall, so that's individual subscriptions. and over 15 million SVOD households. It's now booming in 2020, even before the lockdown. And then during the lockdown, the launch of Disney Plus, further growth in Netflix. Disney Plus, we reckon, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it's about 4 million viewers. So again, it's an ad-free platform, so it does change the dynamics of the industry. And thirdly, we're starting to see the new wave of AVOD services. This is pretty much a US phenomenon, or was really until sort of the middle of last year. And we're starting to see this in the UK now with likes of Pluto TV, Zumo. We've just seen Roku Channel launched and Rakuten TV as well. Now, this is actually pretty big business already in the States. Around 1/3 of US broadband consumers are using at least one of these AVOD services. There's been a huge number of acquisitions in this sector recently. You've probably seen just in the last few weeks, for example. And that's going to drive the international expansion of some of the services we see here, like Pluto, like Zumo. So again, further disruption, but again, potentially further room for collaboration with existing broadcasters in the landscape as we move forward. So the advertising space, there's a lot going on there. And obviously this is the sector which ultimately fuels a lot of the innovation we see in the industry. Touching lastly for me on the COVID point, and we've sort of touched on a lot of these already, so I'll not dwell too long on these. Acceleration is a key point here. The current situation accelerated a lot of the behaviour, as I mentioned previously, and a lot of that behaviour will stick. Diversification of viewing, as you've seen, so people discovering new genres, new platforms. How much of this will stick? How many people are going to do Joe Wicks once lockdown ends? But for some people, that may have been their first experience of standing in front of the TV and watching YouTube. It's also stimulated alternative strategies, likes of Jamie's BT Sport, production and working practices. So, being creative really in terms of the content production and delivery side. And as Jack mentioned, it's also been proof to a point of the resilience of the broadband networks. Okay, just hand over to Jack before we wrap up.
Yeah, thanks, David. So just to summarise, really, I think it's pretty clear, isn't it, that the UK is a dynamic TV market underpinning what's over 16 billion consumer spend on hardware and content. That proud history of innovation continues to deliver important work around challenges raised by diversification of viewing, audiences, service, delivery and production techniques, that many of which David was touching on just now. So whilst we know that broadcast remains core to delivery, we know that many of the opportunities that prevail are actually relating to the harnessing that growing role of IP and making it work in harmony with broadcast, both harnessing IP for viewing, but also in business practices such as production techniques. Collaboration clearly is important as ever across the value chain. We've got strong broadcasters who are viewer-led. They won't make an innovation unless they believe it will mean that their viewers get a better experience, and indeed it might attract more viewers as well. And those companies need partners in order to meet the challenges that they've set themselves in order to create those great experiences. And of course, many of those partners are here in the UK. So UK innovators, they're here and they can rise. They will need to rise to the challenge of playing their role in what is actually, of course, an increasingly crowded and increasingly global stage. Okay, thanks very much. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you, David and Jack. If it's okay with you guys and the audience, we're going to run through till 3:15, just because we started a little late. Lots of questions coming in. Keep them coming in. I'll raise a few of them now. Any we don't get to now, we'll try and make sure we reflect in the final report. So don't worry too much. And one comment was, you mentioned kind of IP resilience, and one comment about Amazon's Premier League rights in December 2019 and how that worked. There was a comment about is there going to be a cultural loss if we kind of move away from the kind of live broadcast situation and kind of appointment to view, and will that kind of have a kind of impact on our society? And there was also a comment on will the kind of likely forced move to country of destination regulatory principle as we Brexit, we haven't heard that word for a while, Brexit, will that kind of have an impact? And another important comment actually from a member of our accessibility forum, Jonathan, is we shouldn't forget the access and accessibility benefits of personalization. They're very significant, not just from an enjoyment perspective, but from a kind of access to content. And we've covered lots of stuff here. I wonder whether, maybe starting with Jamie, if you've got any comments on or any observations on the research.
Yeah, I've got loads on that. Firstly, I'm pleased people enjoyed Amazon, because we talk about partnerships, and as BT Sport, with our partner Sunset Farm, we actually produced all of those live games for Amazon.
Yeah.
So it does show that partnerships do work. I think one thing I'd love to reflect on is we all get caught up with acronyms and different models, and I find that quite confusing, whether it's OTT, whether it's broadcaster, whether it's SVOD, and I look at it much more simplistic than that. So my job at BT Sport is to create and curate content, whether that's live or non-live content. So that's what a job of a broadcaster is. It's to talk to your audience, and it's to editorialise and give your audience the best experience. How you deliver that is slightly different, whether that's over satellite, over linear, OTT, the term OTT. I think Sky pioneered OTT, actually. If you look at Now TV, that is a wonderful OTT model. You can watch BT Sport on PlayStation, on Xbox. 20% of our audience watch live sport on their mobile phone. So I think people miss the point, and some of these numbers are misleading about people engaging with broadcasters and moving away. I think what needs to be understood is broadcasters are aggregating their content across all of these platforms, and if you are creating content and broadcasting it, whether it's OTT or whatever you want to call it, you're still a broadcaster because you're still curating content. And also, we create content, so we've got the biggest YouTube sporting channel in the UK. And that is us creating content aimed at a slightly different market. And what you're seeing is all of this coming together in a really clever way. And the comment, especially around accessibility, I think is critical, because I think the first thing that you want to do with IP delivery is to make your content as accessible as possible. So you can select subtitles, you can select blind commentary, you can select to be able to have software that enables color blindness to be corrected. You can turn down the background noise of a game, or you can turn the commentator up if you're hard of hearing. All of those things are what we're looking at first and foremost, because especially in my genre, in sport is about a social collective coming together, which I know is an interesting turn of phrase in these current times. But that's where sport enjoyment comes from. And so therefore using IP to be able to curate that content to numerous different people, or people who are all together, but ensuring you can be inclusive of the group of people that are together watching is really important. And I think it's really exciting. So, again, going right back to rudimentals, we create content, it's how you distribute it. And the comment about losing that live appointment to view, I don't personally understand, because if something's live, you watch it, and whether you click on a tile or whether you go to an EPG through a box, it's no different for me. It's about ensuring you get there to create content. I think the only thing I would argue, and I'm quite old, so perhaps old-fashioned in some ways, but I do think there is a danger of missing out on what I call the BBC Two effect. And what I mean by that is I'll watch a programme on BBC Two, and it will roll onto another programme that I will perhaps get great enjoyment out of, but I would never have chosen to watch it, never thought to have watched it. And in our industry, we call that the halo principle. It's how we introduce people to other sports. What you put around the Premier League drives bigger engagement. And I think the one challenge we do have is about how we can still create that aggregated benefit if you are not going and following a normal linear channel sort of structure, which will change.
Yeah.
And I think that's an exciting opportunity. actually, because then how do you cross-promote, how do you support? And again, it's about the UX of any platform. How do you take customers to see the range of content that they have and the choices of content they have?
I mean, what's really interesting for me about what Jamie just said, Richard, is that he's absolutely right. And we have to embrace all these different technologies. And it is about, you make content and then you put it on different platforms depending on what you're trying to do or who you're trying to reach. But it comes back to still at the moment business models, because ITV, for example, has seen a massive increase in the kind of viewing they're seeing of their programming, and yet the advertising has fallen by 42% in April. Okay, so their business model isn't working given what they're currently doing in terms of distribution. Yes, they have ITV Hub, but they're not earning enough income on the ITV Hub portion of their distribution model as they are on their linear broadcast model. So there's a certain amount of catch up, Jamie, that has to happen between, making great content and spinning it out on different platforms and adjusting your business model so it actually works in this new world. So, for somebody like BT or Sky, they're in a slightly different mode because they've come in at a different moment. When you're talking about a traditional broadcaster, I'd say their business model is still challenged, and that yes, things like being able to put things on different platforms, being able to monetize them on different platforms more effectively, being able to search for stuff on different platforms more effectively, all that stuff, which gets down to wonderful technologies that we're all working on, voice recognition, AI, etc. That's all really important. But the business model isn't quite caught up yet. And I think for me, that's the thing of how can the broadcasters capitalize on the time that they've had under COVID, where viewing has gone up substantially among all audience groups. How can they leverage that and actually keep that momentum going, perhaps, in the post-COVID time, and also think differently or quicker? Let's say maybe they have to accelerate their thinking about their business model so they can make sure their companies, can stay together.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the one bit of caution I would have, though, is proclaiming a business model defunct. I think with COVID, with the current situation, a lot of the problem with advertising revenue, because normally the model works, the more people who watch, the more money you're able to charge for advertising, quite simple logic. But a lot of brands are not advertising at the moment because of the nature and the mental state of the country and not being seen to capitalise or promote products. So I think it's quite a unique challenge. And I think a big challenge actually is the monetization of digital advertising as opposed to linear advertising and where that's going to go. And you're right, Kate. We're a subscription channel as well, so we have a mix of incomes, whether it's for advertising, subscription, so that we're not as reliant on one. But I do think the business model has worked very well for the likes of ITV. But when you've got brands not advertising, because it's counterintuitive, isn't it? At the moment, more people are watching than ever. Yeah. So in theory, those slots should be worth a heck of a lot more. But if you haven't got that competition coming in from the brands because of the sensitivities around either their products or the tone, or they're not, it's not the right time to advertise, that's where it becomes difficult.
No, you're right. It's not just the tone. It's not just the tone. It's also they think people aren't buying. I mean, that's why a lot of them have pulled their advertising. They think nobody has any money to buy anything, which isn't totally correct. I mean, I was talking to Sir Martin Sorrell the other day, and he of ex-WPP, and he was saying, what's happening is that Amazon is, still working, but the other things aren't because so many high street stores are closed. We're going to see a huge amount of economic failure going on here. So the brands that are going to come back, I agree with you, they will come back. And again, there will be some tone issues and how they come back and, do they want to be advertising around, quote, negative stories about COVID. But it's also about the fact that they don't believe that there's a lot of consumer confidence in buying stuff. So I don't think it's going to be like flipping a switch. I think that the recovery is going to be, as Sir Martin said to me, it's not going to be a V shape or even a bathtub shape. It's going to be a W shape. We're probably going to get reinfections. They're going to be. It's not going to be a smooth line, up like maybe it was in 2008. It's going to be a very different kind of recovery. And I think this is going to impact the results.
Yeah, I wonder whether it's going to be a double W, Kate, if we're not careful. Let's see what he comes up with next. Okay, so we're kind of heading towards the end of our time. I'm just going to pass one comment on. Barry Fox has sent a comment in saying this has stress tested our broadband infrastructure in ways that would not otherwise have been possible. Do you think that'll be an excuse for legislatures to starve our broadcasters of radio bandwidth? Judging by today's impact and the fact that I had to buy a 5G device to get broadband in SW4 London, Barry, I think we might be safe with broadcast for a little while, but we'll see. I'll maybe just one last quick comment from Kate, Jamie, Jack, David, and then I'll wrap up. Kate?
Well, the other thing that I thought was interesting in terms of stuff going forward, I mean, what I said at the beginning, I think is really important. You know, are we thinking about, a user demand led innovation curve, or are we thinking about having more of a roadmap? And I think you should lean more towards the roadmap. I think that there has to be sort of recognize where we're trying to get with the UK technology innovation and broadcasting and IP and whatever it is industry, because I don't want to see us lose the lead that we have and the kind of technology, the great technology that we have. So I think in some ways we need to sort of be very focused on getting government interested in this and showing them that this is a great sector and why it needs support and why we need to make, I mean, with everything that's going on with Brexit and everything else, I just think that that's really important. And then one other note I just wanted to make, which is slightly maybe not quite germane to this, but I think we're going to see a lot more M&A coming up. I mean, I think that because business models are under stress, we're going to see different kinds of people buying different things. And I mean, if you just look at what's happening now with Virgin Media and O2, looking to buy each other. So I think that we are going to see those kind of things happen. Those are big tectonic plate movements, but they're going to impact what kind of technology happens, what kind of research happens, and what kind of money goes into innovation. So I think that's an interesting one too.
Thanks, Kate. Jamie?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Kate said. I think the roadmap is pretty important, and I think the fundamental of only bring innovation in if it meets your editorial or audience requirements, not just because you're clever. And I think there's also a little bit of a word of caution. I keep hearing a lot of people saying, quality doesn't matter anymore. People accept lower quality. And I actually differ on that. I think formats and better viewing experience will increase even further. And I think once we all get out of lockdown, the first thing we will all be doing is looking at our home setups and our TVs and thinking, if I go into lockdown again, could it be better? And secondly, I think, this audience tolerance is a blip. And some of the programs, some of the ones we do, I mean, we're making programs from people's homes using broadband to create a gallery so no one leaves their home. And they're very good. But when we're back to whatever normal is, I think tolerance thresholds will go right back up again. So I think there's a real caution about, we don't need 8K anymore or 4K. I don't agree with that. And I think we need to be clear on our roadmaps and do what we do now. The UK, Sky, BT Sport, in particular in the UK, we really do drive the international appetite around broadcast for a little island. We do really well on it. And we lead on things like 4K and HDR, etc., because I think we have perhaps a closer understanding of what our audiences want, and I would hate us to lose that. So I think it's important that if you've got a roadmap, you don't just chip and change it. You've got it for a reason, and you stick to it, and you keep working to simplify it. Okay, so my big bugbear is, I think I said it earlier, is formats. If I say to you we're broadcasting BT Sport on 4K, HDR, WGC, DA, PQ, means absolutely bugger all to anybody. But actually, if I say to you, if as a customer, when you put on your device and the picture quality and the sound from BT Sport is phenomenal and takes you closer to the action, then I've done my job. So I think that's all still really important.
Brilliant. Jack, David, you want to say a few last words?
I would like to echo what you both said, Jamie and Kate, actually about that roadmap. We've stressed the importance of collaboration. If people are going to collaborate and work together, it's got to be towards some kind of common aim, and a group of common aims could be conceived as a roadmap.
Yeah, and I would echo that and Jamie and Kate's comments as well. I think the collaboration here, the opportunities are perhaps as important than there ever have been. You know, the diversification, the fragmentation we've seen, more and more services, platform technologies, plus the current situation, and you know, Kate alluded to perhaps some increased M&A activity. That need for sort of pan-industry collaboration or individual services collaborating either within the UK or with global companies too is perhaps more important than ever. And I think that will be the roadmap to innovation, whether that's innovation across sort of advertising. I think super aggregation across many areas is a huge amount of headroom, and almost that's the holy grail in some ways. And I think it is key. So that collaboration, I think, has certainly been another watchword which we picked up during our research, cheesy as it may sound.
Thank you, David. Probably just worth mentioning, I'm leading a piece of work with the international standard development organisations in our sector, looking at what the new normal looks like, kind of reimagining the future, because we certainly think the recent events have accelerated some of the work that we've been doing. Okay, thank you very much, David, Jack, and a big thanks to Kate and Jamie in particular for bearing with us with our Safari tech wrinkle. Thank you very much for a lively debate. Just a reminder, the State of the Nation survey is in the resources section. And please spare a few minutes to fill this out. The research is still live and we're keen to make it as comprehensive as we possibly can so that when we release it in early June, it fulfills as many people's needs and data as possible. That's all from me, Richard Lindsay-Davies at the DTG, and please join us for our next event, which is at 2 p.m. on Thursday, the 21st of May. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, guys.